to get started? Do you want to get, should we turn down? I think a lot of people coming. Yeah. We'll let people kind of trickle in as we're getting started here to make sure that we have time to hear this, the next two talks and the plenary sessions, and to make sure we have time for discussion and questions. My name is Madeline Brosen, and I work for the University of California, Los Angeles, and I work at a research center that focuses specifically on Los Angeles and how kind of people live, move, and work in the region. It's really an honor to be here. Thank you to Vanya and to the organizers of the conference. I'm trained as an urban planner, and I think in urban planning, I don't think that this issue gets nearly enough attention and consideration in terms of how the lived experiences of women and people who don't feel safe really gets integrated into the decisions and into kind of having a better environment for everyone. So in the last session, we took a look kind of at the individual and how those experiences really shape kind of what the response is going to be. And in this session, we're going to kind of take a few steps back and have a broader look at a couple of global perspectives on this issue. I want to first just briefly introduce our two speakers, and then we'll get started. So first, we're going to hear from Elisabeth Lofgren. Elisabeth is the vice chair of the board of the United Nations Women's National Committee here in Sweden, and prior to that, she had a long career with Amnesty International. After her, we'll hear from Supreet Singh, and Supreet works with the Safe City Initiative in India. In addition to her work with the nonprofit organization, she's a writer, director, and activist. Safe City is part of the Red Dot Foundation, and Supreet is also working on her first feature film. So I think we're going to hear a robust presentation from both of these and also have a good conversation at the end. So with that, I'll invite Elisabeth to give the first talk.
So, good afternoon. I've been asked to talk about a very specific thing, and that is refugee women and their situation. Before that, I will give a very brief introduction of the organization I am representing, UN Women. For many years, the United Nations faced serious challenges in its efforts to promote gender equality globally, including inadequate funding, and it had no single recognized driver to direct UN activities on gender equality issues. The work on women's issues was divided between several UN organizations, and to be honest, it wasn't very effective. In July 2010, the United Nations General Assembly created UN Women, the United Nations entity for gender equality and empowerment of women. And today, UN Women has programs and projects in 177 countries around the world. But I will now talk about refugee women. These are today's statistics about refugees in the world. There are 78.5 million people who are forcibly displaced worldwide. 40 million of those are internally displaced. That means that they have fled from their village or their city to somewhere else within the country. And sometimes that can happen time and time and again, because one place will be safe and then in a few weeks it will not be safe anymore. There are 25.4 million who are recognized as refugees. And on top of that, we have 3.1 million who are asylum seekers. So not all refugees have applied for asylum. To apply for asylum, you have to go and get it to the border of a country. If you're in a camp, you cannot be an asylum seeker, because you have to get into the country where you want to seek asylum first. A familiar picture for many of you, I think. Women are often the first responders in a crisis, and whether they are en route or in camps, in home countries or destination countries, they play a very crucial role. Yet refugee women's needs, priorities and voices are often missing from policies designed to protect and assist them. 8 years since the start of the conflict in Syria, in the Syrian crisis, it has displaced more than 6.6 million people internally and seen more than 5.6 million Syrians scattered across its borders. The humanitarian crisis in Syria has had devastating consequences, from food insecurity to loss of educational opportunities, lack of safe water or health services, and with high rates of gender-based violence, women and girls are facing the brunt of the crisis. The UN Women's response to this crisis is critical that we address the unique needs of women and girl refugees and provide them with not only security but also durable opportunities for empowerment. With the present level of refugees, normal protection structures often disappear, leaving the human rights of women and girls particularly at risk. They are often explicit targets of violence, with an estimate of 1 in 5 women having experienced sexual violence, and then on top of that, other types of violence. This number is, of course, likely to be very underestimated because it's very hard for many women to report about what they have been experiencing. And it's also a culture in many countries that you keep violence against women as a secret. But there is an urgent need for humanitarian action to ensure refugee women and girls have access to secure transit routes, safe spaces, and protection when they arrive in the host country, and resources and services that will help them to build a post-conflict life free from violence and poverty. Many female refugees have been subjected to severe violence, including being raped in their home countries in conflict, not only during the conflict or in war, but also on their journey seeking safety. I think we've all heard about stories about women who have been forced to pay with sex for trying to get through a country to a destination. They're often forced by criminal gangs for trafficking and so on. But their problems don't end once they get their destination. Whether they are in refugee camps or in other places, or have found shelter somewhere else, there is a high risk of insecurity and sexual and gender-based violence. It's also the separation of women and girls from their families which poses a special risk, since they may be exposed to sexual exploitation, including trafficking. And also what we've seen in the conflict in Syria, very many girls have been forced into child marriages. It's thought as being a kind of protection to them. Instead, they will suffer even more exploitation and rape and violations. Bathrooms and latrines are often no-go zones after dark, but even in daylight for women and girls. We have testimonies from refugee women who say that even though I am in a camp and even though there is a shower, I haven't been there for several weeks because I'm so afraid of being attacked if I go there. These are some bullet points presented by UN Women to authorities who run refugee camps. They should ensure that women are not forced to share shelter with unknown males. Sounds very, very easy and very strange that they don't think of that, but it's very, very common that they have to share tents or even other places, and the risk of sexual violence is very high. Ensure gender separation, security, and lighting in wash areas, also a very simple solution. Increase police presence, but especially include additional police women. Appoint additional staff dedicated to address sexual and gender-based violence. and enhance awareness raising activities, including with boys and men. And I really want to stress this last bullet point. Empowerment of women and ending violence against women will not be possible if we do not address the root causes. Lack of gender equality. This is not a women's issue. It's about human rights and concerns all, both men and women. I think you've seen the photo of this woman. She's Yazidi. She was taken into captivity by ISIS, and she was subjected to very, very gruesome sexual violence and other violence. She's been the voice, and she has her voice has been a way for many women to dare to speak out what they have been experiencing. And also I think that her work will be an eye-opener to many who are supposed to address this issue in refugee camps, in social life as a whole. Nearly 100,000 Syrian refugees have reached the Jordan border, and they are now in the camp of Satari, which hosts now 100,000 refugees. The young women is very, very active in this camp, and we provide economic empowerment and protection program for women and girls. The support is not only about trauma rehabilitation, because many of these women have experienced very, very severe trauma. It's about education, ensuring safe sanitary environment like toilets, which are guarded, as well as necessity like dignity kits, a piece of soap, some underwear, menstrual cups, or sanitary napkins. Sounds very, very simple, but it's also an everyday problem for many, many women if they don't have access to that. One of our main programs in this camp are the Oasis centers, safe spaces. They will provide trauma rehabilitation, but they will also have vocational training. They will have language courses. Some of the women are illiterate, so we will learn them how to read and write. But it's also very much about giving them a possibility to earn a living so that they can, once they leave, first of all, they need money in the camp, because sometimes they are the sole breadwinner. They need money, but also that they need money to be able and have a job when they get out of the camp. We also provide daycare centers so that they can work while their children are in the daycare centers. For many, the Oasis centers has made an enormous change in their lives, not only because they receive rehabilitation, but also it's about empowerment, giving them vocational training as well as education, and the Cash for Work program. In addition to work to meet the women's basic needs in camp, we have special women's camp committees. They consist of both men and women. Beforehand, it was very typical that only the men took part in these committees. Women were afraid to go out of their secure little tent or little house. Now the only way for them to really be empowered is that they take part in the planning of how the camps should be run. This serves to break the isolation of women who face this in the Satara camp, and provides them with skills for access to the public space and economic independence. I will now move over to another possibly familiar situation. What you see here are Rohingyas fleeing from Myanmar, Burma. There are 1 million Rohingyas in Bangladesh, a very, very poor country. And UN Women is active in a camp in Bangladesh, and where there are 1 million refugees. Most of them are Rohingyas. And what we do there is very similar to what we're doing in the Satari camp. We have oasis centers. Of course, the number of refugees in this camp is so enormous. It's an enormous exodus from Burma because of the extreme atrocities which have been committed against the Rohingyas. But we try with the means we have. We also try to expand rapidly to have more and more oasis centers to give them rehabilitation, but also possibilities to work. I've been asked to talk especially about refugees, but I just want to mention we had UN Habitat presenting safe cities programs, and I would also like to say that UN Women is very much involved in this work. We have 35 cities so far where we do work with safe cities. Those are tailored to really suit the different circumstances which are needed in those cities. And we all do it in close cooperation with local NGOs, of course. I will now, and this is a typical way of transport. If you're too afraid to go on public transport, you have to take a tuk-tuk or and here, as you can see, these are schoolgirls who are too afraid to go with the public transport, so they have been offered this possibility to go to school. Another Nobel Peace Prize laureate, Denis Mukwege. I've had the opportunity and the pleasure to meet him several times, and he has for more than 20 years been at the forefront of the battle for sexually abused women. And he's the founder of Panzi Hospital, which has treated more than 85,864 girls and women with complex gynecological injuries. And more than 50,000 of these women have been subjected to and are survivors of horrendous sexual violence. Dr. Mukwege has for years told the international community that the healing path of each individual requires much, much more than just medical care. Survivors, along with other vulnerable women, need transitional housing, they need therapeutic counseling, they need legal aid so that the perpetrators can be put at large, and they need community reintegration services and job training. And I will use Dr. Denis Mukwege's own words when he was told that he was the recipient of this year's Nobel Peace Prize. This award will have real meaning only if it helps mobilize people to change the situation of victims in areas of armed conflict. I dedicate this Nobel Prize to women in all countries in the world, harmed by conflict and facing violence every day. For almost 20 years, I have witnessed war crimes committed against women, girls, and even baby girls, not only in my country, the Democratic Republic of Congo, but also in many other countries. To the survivors from all over the world, I would like to tell you that through this prize, the world is listening to you and refusing to remain indifferent. The world refuses to sit idly in the face of your suffering. And I will end my presentation with these words. Empowerment is not telling women what they need. It is asking them what they want and need, and they should be able to make their own choices. Thank you.
So while the PPT comes up, I made this film a few months back. We were hosting an event for UN Habitat, which is called UTC. And when I started looking at things that I would like to show, I realized that most of the crimes and violence against women are actually committed in public spaces. And that's how this film came about. I was 5 years old when a house help took me to his private quarters and exposed me to his private parts. I don't even remember what happened after that. It's black memory. I was 28, I was in London and I was working. I was sexually harassed by my boss. And I left a fast-track career and went back to India. UN Women says that 1 in 3 women faces sexual harassment at least once in her lifetime. And more than 50% are under the age of 16. 80% of these are not reported. So why don't we report any form of sexual harassment? One is we don't even know what sexual harassment is. When we grow up, and if we find somebody staring at us, and if we tell our mom or our dad, they'll say, lower your eyes, go do your business. You don't need to pay much attention to that. If somebody comments on us, he's just commented, don't worry, nothing's going to happen, move on. Right? Somebody stalks you. Okay, go with your brother tomorrow, or your father will make sure that you are going safely. So we trivialize these things, right? Mostly that's how it starts. And eventually, we start feeling that we are the ones who are making too much out of a small problem. So most of us don't know that these are actually crimes, that these are punishable by laws of different countries. There's a social stigma. If I am being stalked, am I wearing the right clothes? The first thing that will happen is, I've told you not to have so many boys as friends. I have told you not to go to that area in the night. What were you doing there? Right? So mostly it's shaming of the victim. You don't even look at the problem anymore. We have a system. So let's say the family agrees to finally go and report a form of sexual harassment. The police in India says, ma'am, he just touched you, right? How did he touch you? Tell me, where did he touch you? How firm was his grip? So by the time you're actually going to report, you're getting harassed once again, and by somebody who's totally insensitive. And then eventually he'll say, he just touched you, don't worry, he didn't rape you, right? So you get up and you go back. Let's say the police takes your report. The judiciary takes its own time. In India, it's anywhere between 5 to 10 years that a case will actually see the final judgment. So everything pushes you against going ahead and reporting. But what happens when we don't report? There is no problem. It's invisible. How do you solve something which is invisible? You can't. But I think this Vanya has already shared earlier, so I'm not going to go through the various forms of sexual harassment. But what does it do when we don't report? If somebody touched you today, if somebody stalked you today, tomorrow he can probably come and assault you. Most of the cases you saw in that film are real. All the cases are real. The places you saw are symbolic of actual places where those crimes took place. Apart from me, who's also in the film, my story is true. The others are only indicative. But that's the reality. One of them read, I came here to cover news. So there's a journalist who went into a mill, old mill in Bombay, to cover news. She got raped by 6 men who were inebriated and on drugs. That's what she's talking about. But she spoke about it. And when she spoke, there are other women who came forward and said, we have also gone through the same thing with these same men there. Nobody had reported it, so nobody could catch them. And that's what happens. They raped one person one day, nobody spoke about it. It's a serial case of gang raping again and again and again. And what does happen slowly? Women disappear from public spaces. You don't take buses in the night. You don't take public transport in the night. You try not to go out for a walk in the night. I have so many people have spoken about it earlier, so I will not dwell on that. But if you realize, we are actually slowly stopping use of public spaces because we are fearing something's going to happen to us. So if we don't report, it's only going to increase. We're probably not going to see many women out there after a point. I'm going to talk about it tomorrow, so I'm going to go ahead. So when you saw the first case in the film was about a girl who said, I'm Nirbhaya. She said, I was on a bus, I was going home. There were 6 men who gang raped me, took my intestines out of my vagina, and left me to die. That's a real case of a girl called Jyoti Singh in Delhi in 2012. The whole world heard about it. That's when me and Elsa, we got together and we started thinking. And we said, why is this happening? We can't keep on lighting a candle and marching in solidarity all the time. So we realized that there are public spaces which are actually vulnerable to such crimes. So what do we need to do? Like I keep on saying, reporting is so essential. There's so many cases which came out once that girl was actually brought in. They realized there are more cases like these which have happened in the same bus probably and the same route. So reporting became important. And that's when we realized that we probably need to bridge this gap between what's actually happening out there and what is actually being reported to the system. And we came out with Safe City. We are a web platform. We are available on your mobile phones, Android and iOS. What we do is we ask people to anonymously come and report to us any form of sexual harassment they've ever faced in a public space. Even if it's 20 years back, please come and report it. You don't need to give your identity away. You just need to say what happened, where did it happen, and when did it happen, with as much detail as you can. And when that happens, it gets pinned onto a map. It's a global map. You get pinned onto a map, and slowly you start seeing locational trends. You start noticing that there are areas which are rampant with a certain form of sexual harassment. And this data is new data, and it can be used by all the stakeholders to creating safer cities, safer neighborhoods. So if I was coming to this university at, let's say, 8 o'clock in the night, I could zoom up to the road right outside and see if there's ever been any case of harassment at the time that I'm planning to come here. And if I get to know, yes, there have been 3 cases of maybe groping, I would probably change the time that I'm coming here. I'll probably come with somebody, or I'll inform somebody here that I'm coming, can you please come and get me from the metro station? So I'm more situationally aware for how my safety is going to turn out to be, right? We use it with communities. So let's say the campus realizes that there's a hotspot right outside the metro where there are men who are actually, like I said, touching, groping, they're commenting. It's becoming difficult for the students to come from the metro. So the campus as such, the university can take a call on how they want to deal with it, right? They can involve the police, the concerned elected member around the area, and find a solution that will actually take away the harassment. The third is you can use it with the administration. So we actually use it with police in 3 cities in India so far, Mumbai, Delhi, and Goa. We send them monthly reports of whatever reports are coming into us. And they change the timing of beat patrolling of the constables in those areas to make sure that the crime gets contained and the perpetrators are watched. So this is new data, like I said. We have around 11,000 reports over the past 4 years. We are in 10 countries, and we are in 5 cities in India so far. I'm going to now talk about a few impact stories that we had, how we use the data. So this wall that you see here, this is an area in Delhi which is called Lal Kuan. And this particular road has a 10 feet long wall which connects a community to the main road. So if anybody needs to get out of the community and go to school or go to college, they have to take this route to reach public transport. So the girls, when we got some data saying that the girls are facing commenting and ogling at this place, So we went to the community, we opened a conversation, and we asked them, is there any form of violence or harassment that you face? And one after another, the girls started speaking up. It just took one girl to speak up, and then everybody came out and said, yes, I have faced it. My friend has faced it. My daughter faces it. My sister faces it. So these girls, what they would do was they'll wait for other girls to come. They'll go in a group, or they will make sure somebody's dropping them there. Some of them actually changed the route to take a longer route to reach the main road. So while we were having this conversation, and like my earlier panelists have said, that it's very essential to involve all stakeholders. So we eventually involved the men and boys of that community as well. And they realized that this problem was not something which was trivial. Normally commenting and ogling is something which you don't even think about much, right? But they realized that their women were actually getting harassed, and they were intimidated to even go out in daytime and cross that road. So they said we want to give a message to those men who stand there and tell them that there is a law in our land which says this is criminal. And we want to tell them that we do not like what they're doing. Probably they don't even realize it, right? So how do you want to pass on the message? So we think art is a brilliant form of finding solutions and actually talking to the person who will probably never want to accept that he's doing something wrong. So we got an artist who trained the girls of this community that I'm talking about, and they painted that whole 10 feet long wall with signs and with messages. One of that says, Awaaz Uthao, which means speak up. It says, I will not hide, the relentless gaze. This is one of the girls who spoke up first, and she's the one who led the whole campaign. It's been 3 years now, and we haven't heard of a single case of harassment from there. We are in touch with the community. In fact, that small little shop where the men would stand together has been changed by a vegetable grocer. And if a guy actually stops there to look at the women or to say something, he tells them to move on. He says, read the Indian Penal Code that's on the wall and move on. And they actually move on. So that's how the data was used in one of the places. This is another community that I would like to talk about. So this is again in Delhi. There's a place called Sanjay Camp. So these communities are not really privileged, so they don't have personal toilets. They share a toilet. So there are around 250 families who are sharing one place, which has around 3 toilets and 3 bathing rooms. Now this community is actually not even legal. These are communities which were uprooted from their original places, and they've come and they have just landed there and they're staying there. So a lot of times they don't have all the benefits of going to administration and complaining about things as well. This is a Muslim community. They live so close to each other. This is the actual space of alleys between two houses. You can get out from one and get into another. It's that close. That's how they live. So we figured that we got a little data that when you enter, just at the point of entering this community, there is a lot of commenting and groping. So we went into the community, and while we were walking in, we realized that on the right-hand side, as you enter the community, is the community toilet, which is very well painted, and the gate is open. On the left-hand side, right across the gate, is a huge green sofa. There's a couch there, and there were men sitting there. There was a 16-year-old boy who was sitting, and he actually whistled at my colleague while we were walking in. And she just turned back and said, I'm going to the community hall. Why don't you come there? And he obviously ignored what we said, and he whistled a little bit more, and we went in. We opened the conversation. There were only women and girls there. And we asked if anybody's faced any form of harassment, and we told them the data that we had. And slowly, steadily, everybody started coming up and saying, oh, yes, we do. Oh, yes, we do. Oh, but that person is my uncle, or that person's my cousin. So I can't really go and tell my family. And that's how the conversation started. So slowly, we got them to involve the trusted adult from their family. And we asked them what did they want to do. So they said, we know these men. They are related to us, or they are friends, fathers, or uncles, so we can't really go and say anything to them. So what can we do? So we facilitated, again, something similar to what we did in the earlier one. We said, would you like to pass on the message through painting something? So they said yes. So this is one of the paintings on one of the walls of the community toilet. They painted all the walls possible. They put all the Indian penal codes down there with the crime and the punishment that it is. This particular girl was actually, there was a boy who used to come and who used to pull her clothes and pull her stole. So she painted the same thing, and so that's in Hindi, which says, is it all right to do this? Is it right to do this? So when we did this activity, we were walking out and we saw all the men standing in a group and looking at us, and we were very scared for these girls because it's a Muslim community. They anyway don't talk much. It's taboo to even go out and speak to somebody, and if you say the word sex, that's it. You know, you don't even get out of home after that, probably. You just be married and sent to your husband's house. So we went out. We came back the next day in the morning. The couch had disappeared. There was no couch there. And the boy who was sitting there and whistling at us when we were entering that community for the first time, he's now one of the emerging leaders of that community who actually fights for the girls to play cricket with the boys. So that's how we use the data in another one of the communities there. So to say, put it all in a small little, I think if you involve the boys and men, if you can educate them about how women feel of their behavior, if you can bring them up with the concept of human rights are equal for both the genders, if you don't put them in boxes and label them as men and women, you grow up as a boy, this is how you have to behave. If you grow up to be a girl, this is how you have to behave. If you stop doing that, I think we will not be talking about this same problem 20 years from now, because the children that we rear today are going to be the youth tomorrow, and I think that is so essential. So if we could educate our boys, I think we would save our girls in the future. So these are some of the solutions that we feel are essential that we need to work with. In public spaces, of course, urban planning, Juma has already spoken so much about it, so I'm not going to dwell on that, but we need great lighting, we need places to be more human-centric. You have metros, you have flyovers, especially flyovers. There are areas under flyovers that are absolutely isolated, they don't have good lighting, and that's somewhere which becomes, that's a place which becomes vulnerable for perpetrators to catch victims. We need to have eyes on the street, so that's a form of creating urban space where everything is on the eye level. So let's say you are in an area where you have residences, so maybe the wall of the residence should not be more than this, so that there's eye contact with what's happening on the street. You should have functionalizing streets and squares, bringing them to life. So, you know, there are certain streets which are they're hardly used by people on the foot. So in India, a company called Reliance has actually started putting up small bands on such streets. So it just makes it so lively, and the people are stopping and listening to it. So, you know, it becomes more human-centric, and the threat is taken away from there for any future crime. Public transportation, we have great public transportation, but last mile connectivity in a lot of countries is a big problem. So you have metros, but from the metro station to your home, you don't really have public transport that can help you. So that's something that India is working on now. I think that's something we should all think about when we do urban planning. Obviously, we need to increase female participation in urban workforce. Sanitation facilities, women don't use public toilets. I mean, at least in India and the countries around there, women just don't want to. They won't have water the whole day, so that they don't need to go out to a public toilet, right? So we need to think about that as well. Tightening security measures, and obviously strict implementation of penalties. But before all this, I think we all need to make sure that we report any form of sexual harassment that's happened with us. Because unless we report, we are just going to keep on mulling over, oh, this happened here, only when it has happened. I think we need to work on the preemptive space, and we need to start making neighborhoods safer by coming up and giving our bit as well. So yeah, I mean, we all have tips for citizens to take action. So I think bystanders, as bystanders, a lot of us just quietly watch what's happening, and we don't really like to be a part of it. So that's something I think we need to change. On our app, we have, what we have done is, along with reports, we have also mapped the police stations and hospitals and other safe areas. And you can actually, if you're in an area and you find that somebody is in trouble and in need of medical help or police, you can actually just go and click on the number and call them right then. So maybe we need to be a little active. If you feel you're not strong enough to probably handle the goons, maybe you can call the police and help somebody else like that. Women need to reclaim the public space. If you don't feel safe walking out today, maybe you should take some friends and walk out. Claim a place, reclaim a place that you have left out because you think that's isolated or that's unsafe for you. I mean, if we don't do it, we're slowly going to disappear from the other places also. So I think reclaiming is another big thing we should work on. We need to use public transport as much so that you can see that picture that somebody showed earlier where the man was sitting with his, using 3 seats probably, and the girls were probably on half a seat. That doesn't happen, right? So we need to go out. Yeah, of course, I would love you to download the Safe City app on your Android and iOS phones. Please report, because that's the only way that we can bridge this gap between the reality and what is just going to the administration. And use it, share it with your friends, and if you can mark places, so you can actually mark places of safety as well on that. If you know of any police station, if you want to mark your place as a safe haven, please do that. So that's something that I would request you to do. And lastly, if you want to see a change, I think it needs to start with us. So please report any form of harassment that happens with you, and go educate the kids you're going to have. Let them grow up as people and not as boys and girls, which is going to continue keeping this problem still there 20 years from now. Thank you.
Thank you both for these presentations. I think to start off, I just want to, as people kind of formulate questions, we have probably about 10 minutes or so. I think one thing that both of these presentations touch on is kind of about a very basic, about kind of the issues around women's sanitation, and really starting kind of in trying to have women be able to meet their kind of basic needs. So can you kind of expand a little bit on kind of the programs and efforts, both in the cities you work in, kind of trying to improve, just starting at the very basic needs for women in these experiences?
Well, I think first you have to acknowledge that women have problems with sanitation. I mean, it is a problem with public toilets, and it is a problem for many, many women with menstruation. It's not acknowledged. I mean, normally in the Western world, you don't think about it. You buy your napkins or whatever you use. In many countries, you don't have money for that, and then you use dirty towels or whatever, you get infections, you have to stay away from work, and you don't get your pay. And I mean, there are so many problems surrounded with that. And talk to women about it and see what they need, like I ended with. I mean, we are not going to tell them what they need. They are supposed to tell us what they need and work on that as a start.
So the kind of work that we do, I'll again give you an example if you have the time. So there's a particular community, there was a community in Delhi again, where they had a community toilet, but it was kept locked because these are supposed to be taken care of by the government, by the municipal corporation. So when we went in there, the women said that, because there's no toilet, we normally go to the bushes. And this is the area where the trucks would stop in the night, and a lot of them had faced molestation, and some of them had been raped as well. But they don't talk about it because it's part of life now. So we, along with them, we made a report. It was all anonymous reporting. We did not put any names there. We went to the locally elected member of the municipal corporation. They opened the toilet. The community decided that they will take care of it so that they don't need to depend on the government to take care of it for them. And it's been 4 years now, 3.5, 4 years now. They have called us back and said that, you solved that problem for us. We are so thankful. Nobody's got molested or harassed ever again. But we have another problem, so can you come back? So now it's not sanitation and toilets, but it's something else. So that's what we do with communities. So we basically take this data and we use it for as many things as possible, whatever is a vulnerable space for women, yeah.
Other questions from the audience?
Yes, I will. So she agrees that the boys need to be educated from childhood on how to respect women and how to value other lives as they do their own. But is it only for the family to educate their kids? So no, I think you're right. We need to, the other place the kids spend maximum time is their schools. And we are working on a paper to put it to the education ministry in India, where we are asking them to put sex education and gender sensitization as a part of the curriculum from a very young age. It's going to take time because our parties in India, you say sex and they're like, oh my God, I mean, this girl has no character, she's talking about sex. So it's going to be tough, but we are fighting for it. And yes, that's another way. That is the way, in fact, that we can sustain it.
Elizabeth, do you want to add?
I just want to comment, and I will step outside of the area I was talking about. I mean, I talk now about UN Women in Sweden now, the National Committee. We do a lot of work with schools, and we do a lot of work with the sports groups. We start from the very, very early age. Football players when they are 4 or 5 years old, both girls and boys, and I think it's about norms. I mean, it's not an issue just for families, it's absolutely an issue for the whole society, for schools and everything. We have to make boys and girls understand that it's about human rights. It's not women's rights or boys' rights or girls' rights. I mean, we have to see gender equality as a very, very big issue. And it's in Sweden, I mean, it's supposed to be the most gender-sensitive country in the world, and we are very advanced in some ways, but we still have lots of problems in Sweden. And I think it has to start from a very, very early age in all countries.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Sorry, could you say that? My question was, how did you deal with the digital divide, or how do you plan to deal with the digital divide since this is a mobile application?
Okay, so she wants to know how do we work with digital divide, because a lot of women don't really have mobile phones, or even if they have mobile phones, they work under supervision of their husbands or fathers, or they don't have smartphones, or they don't know how to use the phones, right? So we have a missed call facility where women can call us up and we call them back and take their reports. Most of the reports also come from places where we are taking workshops in the communities with the people. So a lot of rural areas is somewhere where we go ourselves and take reports. It's not easy to educate the women to even make a call because, one, they are not educated, they don't understand harassment, they have been beaten up at home, and because marital discord and violence is not really a crime, they don't think that harassment outside is also, that's trivialized as well. So we educate them first and we take first-hand reports from there. So that's how we work with them. But we do have a missed call facility to work with these ladies.
I mean, I think in terms of like the reporting, I mean, we need to make sure that, really, we're going ahead on the digital, but it's not leaving kind of the analog world behind. So in thinking the idea of trying to move things forward, all the people that kind of can't do that, having these kind of fail-safes in place is an important part of that. I think we have time for one more question, if someone has one. Vanya?
I'm still, I think, the same route that she mentioned about the challenges of using apps. I think it's not the most, I guess, important challenge is not the technological barrier, but the kinds of engagement that you have to have in place to engage people. So it's not a question, it's more, if you could just develop a little bit more on that, because I think it's so important. The technological dimension is important, but if you still have barriers for women to go and report, especially, as you mentioned, in rural communities, the types of control in which women actually are under, I mean, it's difficult to go forward. So if you can talk a little bit more on that.
So we started our rural work over the last year and a half, and I don't know how many of you have visited India, but the north of India, the patriarchy is much more stronger, and the men are extremely aggressive, and a woman is seen talking on the phone. Most of the time she's beaten up without any reason. So you're right, Vanya, it's extremely difficult. So through our programs, what we do is we involve the other stakeholders. So there are women who are slowly, who are educated also in these places, and some of them actually have the leadership qualities to take a cause ahead. And most of these villages where we worked with, these 6 villages we worked with over the past 6 months, we have a woman in each village who has come forward, and she said that I will collect the reports and I will send them to you. So we have given them a device, a smartphone. We've taught them how to report to us, and she is collecting the reports. Another one of these places in Mumbai, which is close to Mumbai in Maharashtra, the women are more educated there, of course. Women are stronger than men in that particular state. The person from the police is a lady. So we have panchayats. I don't know if you've ever heard of them, but these are village men who form the law there. Right? So they are the seniors of the village who actually decide what is right and what is wrong. They don't go to the Supreme Court or the High Court. They go to these men and they decide what is wrong or right if there's a crime which has been committed. So we've started getting women who are part of these panchayats or these forums as well now. So in Maharashtra, the villages we worked in, there was a woman who's a part of that, and she, along with the police, are consciously making sure that they have these smartphones. They took a training from us, and they're going around and getting people to come and report to them. So that's a little bit of sustainability that we are seeing, but there's a lot of work to be done, and I think eventually it's going to take a lot of our effort and the government's effort as well to make sure that this is sustainable. But recently we've also got into an association and relationship with Vodafone. You all would have heard of Vodafone. And they have launched a program where women can actually call up the call center and tell them if there's a problem. So now we are working with them on making sure that this plan is only for the women, and this can reach the rural communities also. So they have this basic phone, but they still have the facility of calling back if they have a problem with something.
Well, let's thank our panelists. And then Vanya will tell us our next steps here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madeleine. Really love.
State University in the School of Criminal Justice. And we have a journal. It's called the International Journal of Comparative and Applied Criminal Justice. A very long title, sometimes even I don't remember the title. We're in the process of changing the title to make it short. But the purpose of my announcement here is that for those of you who are in parallel sessions, I won't be able to reach you, so I wanted a forum where it's a common session where I can give you about this background of this journal. This journal is in the 44th year of publication. It's a peer-reviewed journal. It's the official journal for the American Society of Criminology's International Division. It's indexed by Scopus and by Emerging Social Sciences Index. And it's on its way to be indexed in Web of Science. The forum here it's a fantastic opportunity for generating papers that you will be presenting here for consideration for a special issue on gender violence, sexual harassment. If you're around for Friday, I can give more details. But if you want to check the index of the rankings of the journal, you should try Scopus open source page and not Schema-Go. Schema-Go is a website that gives you all the H indexes, indices and other things. But the source page is where, if you type in the journal name, it gives you the metrics for the journal. So if you have more questions about it during the coffee break or any time between the breaks, please come and talk with me. And we really like to encourage you to consider submitting the piece for the special issue that Vanya and I, and you have another colleague, will be the guest, will be editing that particular issue. And it could be a double issue depending on the number of entries we get. So that's just a short announcement. I'll be around and I'll be happy to talk with, about it more if you have more questions.
Thank you very much. So we'll be meeting at 2 o'clock. I can send more information to everybody via email if you want to take part on Friday. Okay, we should be back 4:30 after the coffee break. Thank you very much.